You picture a boy, a small shepherd standing in a valley, a smooth stone in his hand, facing something enormous and terrifying. You picture courage triumphing over size, the little guy winning, the miracle no one expected. That image is not wrong, but it is incomplete, and the parts that got left out of the version you were taught change everything about what this story actually means. This is 1 Samuel 17, and the real account is stranger, more violent, and far more carefully constructed than most people realize. You have to start with the valley. The Valley of Elah sits in the Shephelah, the low foothills between the Judean highlands and the Philistine coastal plain. This is a border zone, a contested stretch of land where two worlds collide. To the west, the Philistines. To the east, Israel. Neither side can afford to lose it. The Philistines have gathered their army on one hill. Israel has gathered on the opposite hill. And between them, a dry riverbed, a no-man's land. This geography matters, because what happens next follows a very specific ancient custom called champion combat. One warrior from each side steps forward to fight on behalf of his entire army. The loser's nation surrenders. No mass casualties. One decisive fight. The Philistines are confident enough in their champion to propose this deal. And their champion is Goliath. The text describes his equipment with unusual precision, and when you understand what it is describing, the picture shifts. He wears a helmet of bronze, a coat of mail weighing 5,000 shekels of bronze, roughly 125 pounds of armor on his torso alone. Bronze greaves cover his legs. A bronze javelin is slung between his shoulders, and his spear has an iron head, weighing 600 shekels, about 15 pounds, on just the tip of the blade. Archaeologists excavating Tel Es Safi, the ancient city of Gath, which the text identifies as Goliath's hometown, have uncovered exactly this type of military equipment. The Philistines had a distinct warrior culture with roots in the Aegean world, probably connected to the sea peoples who swept across the eastern Mediterranean around 1200 BCE. Their weapons and armor match what the Bible describes here with striking accuracy. This was not exaggeration. This was a real fighting tradition, and Goliath was its embodiment. There is something else they found at Gath. In 2005, archaeologists led by Professor Aaron Mayer discovered a small pottery shard during excavations at Tel Es Safi. On it were scratched two names, WLLT and WLT, written in an early alphabetic script, dating to around 900 BCE. Those names are phonetically close to the name Goliath in the original Hebrew. This is not proof that this was Goliath's own shard, but it is the earliest known inscription bearing a name like his, from the exact city the Bible says he came from, within about 70 years of when he would have lived. The valley, the armor, the city, the name. The story is archaeologically grounded in ways most people never hear about. Now, Goliath's height. Your instinct is probably 9 feet 9 inches, 6 cubits and a span. That is the number in the Masoretic text, the Hebrew Bible used by most traditions. But that is not the only ancient manuscript. The Dead Sea Scrolls, discovered near Qumran in 1947, and representing some of the oldest biblical texts ever found, give a different number, 4 cubits and a span. That is closer to 6 feet 9 inches. The ancient Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible, known as the Septuagint, agrees with that lower figure. 6'9" in the ancient world was still enormous. The average Israelite man stood around 5 feet 3. Goliath would have towered over everyone in that valley. But the lower number makes the story more historically plausible, And it shifts the focus where it belongs, not on the impossibility of his height, but on the impossibility of the weapon gap. Because that is where the real tension lives. Goliath is a melee fighter. He is designed for close-range combat. He is a wall of bronze in the shape of a man, built to walk forward and destroy whatever stands in front of him. He expects David to come toward him. That is what the custom requires. Two champions, face to face, in the dry riverbed. David does not do that. What David brings to the valley is a sling. And here is what most people miss. A sling was not a child's toy. It was a military weapon. Ancient armies maintained entire units of specialized slingers. Assyrian reliefs carved into the palace walls of Nineveh, excavated in the ruins of Sennacherib's palace in the 19th century, and now housed in the British Museum, show slingers deployed in coordinated formations alongside spearmen and cavalry. A trained slinger could hurl a lead or stone projectile at over 100 miles per hour. The kinetic energy at impact has been compared to that of a modern handgun round. Slingers in the ancient world were not backup. They were specialists. David had been slinging since childhood. He tells Saul directly, he has already used his hands to kill both a lion and a bear that threatened his flock. He is not an amateur. He is not a child playing with a toy. He is a ranged specialist in an era before gunpowder, one of the most lethal long-range tools a single man could carry. Facing a heavily armored fighter who can only operate at close range. That reframe matters enormously, because this was never a story about the weak defeating the strong. It was a story about someone choosing the right tool for the right fight, and having the clarity to see what everyone else was too frightened to look at clearly. But there is still the question of the 5 stones. The text says David reaches into the stream and picks up 5 smooth stones before he walks into the valley. Why 5? He only needed 1. The text does not explain. But later in the book, in 2 Samuel 21, something interesting surfaces. 4 more Philistine giants are listed, all of them relatives of Goliath, and all of them eventually killed in separate battles by David's warriors. Some rabbinic tradition holds that David picked 5 stones, knowing he might face Goliath and his 4 brothers. He did not come to win one fight. He came prepared for whatever the valley asked of him. That is the part the Sunday school version leaves behind. There is one more thing about David that gets flattened in the retelling. When Saul's servants describe David to the king before he ever faces Goliath, they call him a man of valor, a man of war, prudent in speech, and a man of good presence. The Hebrew word translated as youth is na'ar. It can describe a young man of fighting age, not a small boy, not a child. A young man who has already proven himself in actual combat. Saul even tries to dress David in his own armor before the fight. Saul is described as a head taller than every other man in Israel. The armor does not fit David because it is too large. Not because David is undersized. David has simply never trained in heavy armor. He refuses it. He goes with what he knows. That choice, refusing borrowed armor and trusting your own method, is the decision that wins the fight. So here is what actually happened in the valley of Elah. Goliath stood in the riverbed for 40 days and shouted his challenge. 40 days. Israel's army, including trained soldiers, experienced commanders, and Saul himself, the tallest man in the nation, refused to move. Not because they lacked weapons, because they looked at Goliath and could only see what he wanted them to see. The size, the bronze, the impossibility. That is a strange kind of paralysis. These are men who have fought before. men who have bled in battle. And yet 40 days pass, and not one of them steps forward. David arrives with food for his brothers. He is not there as a soldier. He hears the challenge for the first time. And the text says he asks a single question. Who is this uncircumcised Philistine, that he should defy the armies of the living God? He does not ask whether it is possible to fight him. He asks why no one already has. His older brother Eliab hears him and dismisses him. He tells David to go back to his sheep. He accuses him of arrogance and pride. And that reaction is interesting. Eliab has been watching this situation for 40 days and has done nothing. David walks in and sees something different within minutes. That gap between the people who stare at the problem and the person who sees past it is the emotional core of the story. David is brought before Saul. Saul tells him he is too young and too inexperienced. David tells Saul about the lion and the bear. Saul sends him anyway, because no one else has offered. David crosses the riverbed at a run. The sling is already moving. The stone strikes Goliath in the forehead, the one place not covered by his armor, where a single impact at high velocity can be immediately lethal. The giant falls. David takes Goliath's own sword and uses it to finish the fight. The Philistines see their champion fall, and they run. The Israelite army, frozen for 40 days, suddenly pursues them all the way to the gates of Gath and Ekron. The valley belongs to Israel. This is 1 Samuel 17. It is one of the most cited stories in all of human history. And yet, the version that travels through culture is so often stripped of everything that gives it real weight. The real story is not about smallness overcoming greatness. It is about clarity. About a young man who walked into a situation everyone else had been staring at for 40 days and saw something different. Not an unbeatable opponent, but a slow melee fighter who had never once faced a trained slinger at range. Wearing armor that protected every part of his body except the one place that mattered most. The stone did not defy the odds. The stone went exactly where physics said it would go, thrown by someone who had trained for years and chose the weapon that fit the fight. Goliath had no answer for David. He never did. Every situation that looks impossible from one angle looks completely different from another. The army saw a 9-foot wall of bronze. David saw an unprotected forehead, an open valley, and 30 feet of clear air. You picture a boy, a small shepherd, a miracle. But what the text actually describes is a man who refused borrowed armor, trusted the skill he had built in obscurity, and asked the question no one else in the camp was willing to ask. Goliath was never as safe as he looked. And neither is the obstacle in front of you.